Yeah, good. I don't have a recording for that. Starting, let's see if it's gonna work now.
If you make it private, then I have to set it public after it's made.
No, I did the
But
public, that's fine.
it's
Okay,
okay.
yes, good.
It's working. Good.
It's okay.
Zoom in more.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
کس طرح باغی سکینہ کو کلائی ہوگی آگ جب خیموں میں آنے لگائی ہوگی آگ جب خیموں میں آنے لگائی ہوگی مسند احمد مرسل مسند احمد مرسل بھی جلائی ہوگی ایک نشتر سا لگا ہوگا دل مہاجر پر ایک نشتر سا لگا ہوگا دل مہاجر پر جب سے اکبر ناشاد جب سے اکبر ناشاد نے کھائی ہوگی دیکھ کر میت بے شیر کو مادر نے کہا دیکھ کر میت بے شیر کو مادر نے کہا یہ نامعلوم تھا یوں یہ نامعلوم تھا یوں دودھ بڑھائی ہوگی ڈھونڈتی ہوگی وہ پہلو میں علی اصغر کو ڈھونڈتی ہوگی وہ پہلو میں علی اصغر کو نیندبانوں کو بھلا نیندبانوں کو بھلا کس طرح آئی ہوگی فاطمہ صغریٰ نے اصغر کو جو مانگا ہوگا فاطمہ صغرا نے اصغر کو جو مانگا ہوگا گود اجڑی ہوئی مانو گود اجڑی ہوئی مانوں نے دکھائی ہوگی جب سنا ہوگا گرے سرور دی گھوڑے سے جب سنا ہوگا گرے سرور دی گھوڑے سے ننگے سر زینب مجھکر ننگے سر زینب مجھکر نکل آئی ہوگی رسن ظلم میں منی سی کلائی ہوگی صلوات
Recite Surah Fatiha for all those marhum buried here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا بالقاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وأهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هو الحي لا إله إلا هو فادعوه مخلصين له الدين الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So the ayat that I just stated is chapter 40, verse 65 of the Quran. And the translation is as goes. Allah, which is referred to as He in this ayah, is ever living. There is no God but He. So call upon Him, consecrating Him to Him all your devotion. All praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of the universe. That is His real and true life. He only is living by virtue of His own power. No one else has the eternal and everlasting life but Him. All others have borrowed and temporary life, which is destined to death and perishable. What this says is simply what we're living in is the dunya. And the true religion of Islam is through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we need to do is we need to look at the true religion of Islam. Now we have two sides. We have the side of the Ahlul Bayt and the side of caliphs. After the Prophet's death, caliphs began to step forward. But we know that the Ahlul Bayt is the answer. Why? Because it says in the Quran. Because it says in the Quran. And ayat at-Tathir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses the Ahlul Bayt. Why? He calls them pure. Right? We all know what ayat at-Tathir is. We all know the instance of ayat at-Tathir from Hadith al-Qisa. Right? In ayat al-Mubahira, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Ahlul Bayt as the truthful ones. Those who only tell the truth. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Now the question is, why imama? Well, the Quran also says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I choose the Khalifa. Indeed, I choose the Khalifa. Very, very few instances where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually uses the word I instead of using the word we in the Quran, or us. But he refers to himself as I in this situation, which means that it's very, very important. Indeed, I choose the Khalifa of this world because I know better than you. Very simple, right? So this idea of election, right? This idea of electing someone who is not Muslim, electing someone who is not pure, is not a part of the Quran. It's in innovation. And when we see with these first three caliphs, right? Innovation after innovation after innovation comes. I'll give you an example. Off the bat, election, right? You have election is number one. 2.5 years later, what happens? The next caliph comes. This is where the idea of namaz sort of changes, where they begin to cup their hands around their stomachs. It's when they begin to stop reciting Bismillah, right? These are minor, differences, right? But they in turn move, and we see how much of a difference is created and how much fitna has spread between the two groups today, right? Another example is appointing governors, right? They spread this empire so much that they were appointing governors for Egypt, Damascus, etc., etc. One of these emperors, or one of these governors was actually Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan. And what we see is Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan was very power hungry. And when you're able to classify someone as power hungry, then you see that there's a problem in the system. That someone corrupt is seep through the cracks. And the issue of Muawiyah is not an issue between Shia and Sunni. It's an issue between haqq and falsehood. It's an issue between right and wrong. It's an issue between tyrant and peace, right? Why do we look at Muawiyah like this? Some people dare to praise him these days. What happens is we see Muawiyah in Damascus. He's the governor there. Damascus is the largest place to govern, right? He's in rule over there. He was appointed by the second caliph and kept in there because he was cousins with the third caliph. Also, another thing to note, nepotism, very huge thing in these caliph systems. But what we see Muawiyah do is he starts to really brainwash the people of Damascus, the people of Sham. What does he do? Friday prayers, he begins to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. Friday prayers, he curses Imam Ali alayhi salam. What he would do is he would give the poor sheep, and in the night after he gives them sheep, during the night he would steal the sheep and say, Ali did this to you. These are the types of actions that that were done against the people of the Ahlul Bayt. The people who were mentioned as pure and the people who were mentioned as the truthful, according to the Quran. Salah. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam becomes the next caliph, the fourth caliph, after the death of the third, what happens? Well, there's controversy. Of course, some people don't want to give up their power, like Muawiyah. And this corruption leads to bloodshed. First battle is the Battle of Jamal, where Muawiyah inserts his own spies and his own people and his own army against Imam Ali. Then comes Siffin. Siffin is a discussion between Imam Ali and Muawiyah. And it starts out as a discussion, ends up in a war. Why? Because right when they set up their tents, Muawiyah cuts off water. Very familiar, right? His son did that to Imam Hussain. Now, what we see here is that they begin to fight, of course, But Imam Ali alayhi salam's generosity in the end prevails. Imam Ali alayhi salam's army gets the water back. They obtain the water. Muawiyah's army is very thirsty, and they ask Muawiyah, "We're very thirsty, how do we get this water?" And they said, "Ali will never deny you of food and water." They went to Imam Ali alayhi salam, asked, and were given water. They were asked and given food. So we see that the compassion of Imam Ali alayhi salam that is described in the Quran, right? The virtues of the Ahlul Bayt really prevails in the end, right? The virtues. That always the one side that we follow, the haqq, will always prevail, right? This is also another ayat in the Quran, right? Very, very, very easy to decipher and see what is and what isn't from the Quran. Now, what else does Muawiyah do? He fights with Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? We know that he puts the Qurans on spears in order to stop the fight, right? In the same fight of Siffin, what happens? Well, Ammar ibn Yasir is killed, right? He is given milk, not water. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet tells him before he passes away that the last drink, the last beverage, the last food, anything you will ingest will be milk. And Hazrat Ammar ibn Yasir is given milk and is slaughtered. So he is shaheed. But another hadith that is actually given in front of many people is that the kuffar will kill Ammar. This is verified. This was in front of multiple people. In fact, after these men of Muawiyah's army killed Ammar ibn Yasir, they stopped for a second. They pulled back. They said, "Muawiyah, we can't do this. We've just killed Ammar ibn Yasir. And we are kuffar according to our very own Prophet." And the response that he gives is a very cunning response, is that Ali has killed him. Ali has killed him. Why? Because you put him out in the battlefield. This is where Imam Ali alayhi salam smiles and says, what? Well, by that logic, the Prophet has killed Hazrat Hamza by putting him in battle. So the logic here is skewed. Again, on one side you see great actual logic that's backed up by Quran, that is backed up by Hadith, that is backed up by the Prophet himself, and then you see a side that is backed up by nothing, that does not have any sort of basis, any sort of logic, right? And again, this is not a Sunni Shia debate. If the Prophet says someone is a kuffar, then they are kuffar, right? It's very simple. Now, of course, within the very own army of Imam Ali alayhi salam, there are also spies. So when there's time for negotiations, the spies turn on Imam Ali alayhi salam, turning into another battle, which is Jang-e-Nahrawan. So there are 3 battles which this one individual starts within a span of just a few years and just a little time period after the death of the 3rd caliph. Now, when we look at the time of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Allahumma salli Imam Ali alayhi salam is killed. Muawiyah is trying to get that khilafah that he is aspiring for. He has all this power. He has the leverage of Sham. What else does he do in Sham? He does many things. Again, the cursing of the Ahlul Bayt is prominent over there. He does it every Friday. Not only that, but in his own private places, he would drink. He would do these things. He would do many haram things that I cannot speak of on here on this minbar. But these are the types of actions that the so-called next caliph would actually do while he was a governor and while he became a caliph himself. But he would insert spies in Medina. These spies would, of course, start controversy. They would start fights within the land. One actually dipped a dagger in poison and slashed the very leg of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. As I said before, it's not a Sunni and Shia debate, right? Imam Hassan alayhi salam was a Khalifa at the time. Imam Ali alayhi salam was a Khalifa at the time when Muawiyah did these things, right? So going against the Khalifa of your time, according to their standards, is a death of Jahiliyyah. So therefore, Muawiyah dies a death of Jahiliyyah. I almost forgot to mention this one other point, which is that during the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he also wanted the son of Abu Bakr, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, who Imam Ali alayhi salam actually raised to be governor of Egypt. He sends him to Egypt, and that is the job of Amr ibn As. And then what happens is Muawiyah's own men kill him, put him in a donkey carcass, and burn the body. Are these the actions of someone who should be representing us as Muslims? As the Muslims, not even with sects. But are we supposed to follow someone like this? This is the son of their first Khalifa. So again, this is not a Sunni and Shia debate. But what we see is that the system that is created, people like this are able to see through the cracks. But what happens in the end? In the end, haqq will always prevail. Imam Ali alayhi salam is doing what? When Muawiyah fights, he does what? He gives Muawiyah's army water, and on top of that, fights and his way all the way through Muawiyah's army until they have to surrender by putting Qurans on spears. Until they take the coward move. Imam Ali alayhi salam shows that he's a stronger fighter, he has virtues, he has a certain etiquette, he follows the battles of war, he follows the rules of war, where you should not cut water off, cut trees unnecessarily, etc., etc. Imam Hassan alayhi salam does what? When Muawiyah is stirring up controversy, he says, you can have the Khilafah, but what will I do? I will make a peace treaty. You have to follow these terms to be a Khalifa, right? So either way, no matter how many people try to interfere with the true religion, no matter how many people try to interfere with the real true religion, the real true ideals of Islam, haqq will always prevail. And we see the same exact thing when it comes to Muawiyah's son and Imam Ali alayhi salam's son, Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Yazid cuts off water, but what does Imam do? The reason that we talk about Yazid is only because of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, right? He's a tyrant. Imam Hussain alayhi salam showed that Yazid is not Islam, right? What did Yazid do after Imam Hussain alayhi salam was killed? He burnt the walls of the Kaaba. He made Masjid Nabawi a stable for horses. Again, it sounds very familiar, right? This is what Sufyan is going to do. So this lineage, we see that they've done horrible things. Yazid himself, right? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, right? We take the kalma, we decipher this. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He went against that by burning the Kaaba, right? Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, went against that by putting stables in Masjid Nabawi. Ashhadu anna Ali Waliullah, went against this by killing the very son of Imam Ali alayhi salam, right? So one by one through the kalma, you see that he has X'd out all of these. He's not considered a Muslim by doing this, right? He's going against the very principles of Islam. But we don't talk about the Kaaba being burnt. We don't talk about these verses, interfering and becoming stables and having that in Masjid Nabawi, right? We don't talk about that. Why? Because Imam Hussain alayhi salam has proven what true Islam is. You don't need to worry about this. True Islam is the Islam where haqq will always prevail. And the Ahlul Bayt made it clear and made sure that true Islam would come down to generations. So for us to be sitting here right now and learning about it once again. And we see that the true haqq happens on the day of Ashura. The true haqq is shown on the day of Ashura. We see that the water is cut off again, just like Yazid's father. And again, just like Siffin, we see the face of Ali fighting and going to get water for his family and making sure that his army has water. Hazrat Abbas tried to go. He tried to go get water. He tried to go fight for the sake of Islam. he asked his Mawla many times, may I please go and fight? May I please go and fight? May I please go and fight? To one point where he goes back to the tent and he sees Bibi Sakina with them dry mushed, her dry lips. She begins to tell him, oh my Chacha, please, can I go get water? Can you go get me water? Imam Hussain alayhi salam sees this. Hazrat Abbas gives him the dry mushk and says, this is what your Sakina has asked me. May I go get water? Imam Hussain alayhi salam says with tears in his eyes, yes, you may go get water. Hazrat Abbas gets ready. He begins to put on his armor. What he also does is, instead of bringing a sword, some riwayat said that he brings a spear. This is a weapon of neutrality. He doesn't want to fight, but out of defense he will fight. Hazrat Abbas takes the spear. He goes on this horse. He begins to go set off. He goes. The armies begin to leave. They see that this is the face of Ali. This is the face of Ali. This is the face of the man who lifted the door of Hyder. This is the very man who who is in Siffin, who is disguised as Imam Ali alayhi salam and fought like Imam Ali alayhi salam. They wanted no part of this. They went back. Hazrat Abbas got off of his horse. He was able to get to the water. He begins to fill the mushk up. He puts water in his own hands and looks at it. He remembers his own father told him one time, prior to his death, on the deathbed, he tells Abbas, on that day, do not drink any water. Your Mawla is thirsty. Perhaps when he was looking at this water, he saw the face of Sakina. Perhaps he saw the face of Bibi Sakina. Perhaps he saw the dry lips. Perhaps he was reminded of the dry lips of his own brother. He throws this water back into the river. He picks up the mushk and goes back on his horse and sets off back to the tents. The enemies see this and they say, if Hussain gets a drop of this water, we're finished. They begin to fight him they begin to fight around him through all sides. They begin to throw rocks at him, spears at him. They begin to shoot many arrows. The very alam that Hazrat Abbas was holding, they say in Sham, when they took this alam, there were arrows in every single spot, except for the spot where Hazrat Abbas had his hand. Imagine how many arrows hit each finger. Imagine how many arrows were in that one hand. Eventually the time comes where one enemy comes from a bush and cuts the right hand of Hazrat Abbas. He says, if you cut the right hand of mine, I will use my left hand. The whole time Hazrat Abbas recites poetry. He says, do you know who the grandson of the Prophet is? The very man you're depriving of water is the grandson of the Prophet. Hazrat Abbas keeps going, he's fighting, he's making sure that the water gets to Sakina. I wonder that when he's on his horse, is he thinking of Sakina? Or is he thinking of Ali Asghar? Is he thinking of Hussain? Or is he thinking of Zainab? The next enemy comes and cuts the left arm of Hazrat Abbas. Hazrat Abbas catches the mushk with his teeth. He begins to keep going. He's not far away from the tents at this point, where Hurmala shoots an arrow and it hits the mushk. One arrow hits his eye, one arrow hits his chest, but I say that the one that hit the mushk is the one that truly broke Abbas. The one that tore the mushk is the one that broke Abbas, because he knew he couldn't get that water to Sakina. Hazrat Abbas turns around, he turns his horse away from the tent. When you go on ziyarat, inshallah, we all get the opportunity to go. But you look at the Khaymagah, that's where Imam Hussain alayhi salam had his tent, and you look at the grave of Hazrat Abbas. And very close to the Khaymagah is the place where the arrow hit the mushk. Hazrat Abbas was so ashamed. He felt so ashamed that he turned his horse away from Sakina, away from the tents, and said, oh my Mawla, please help me in my last moments. Imam Hussain alayhi salam comes. They say that Imam Hussain alayhi salam stumbles every now and then, falls down. Why? Because Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, I broke my back. Imam Hussain alayhi salam eventually finds the body of Abbas and sees that he has no arms. Imam Hussain picks up each arm, holds it gently, goes to the body of Abbas and says, Abbas, is there any last requests you have? And he says, I have two. Please, for once, for my first request, please take this arrow out of my eye. The blood is going onto the other eye. Please just wipe the blood off. I want you to be the last thing I see in this earth, on this world. Imam Hussain alayhi salam does as told. He wipes the blood off of Abbas's eye, and then Hazrat Abbas says, please don't bring my body back to the tents. I don't want Sakina to see me in this state. Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, I have one request for you. And just imagine in this moment, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he was already seen Imam Ali alayhi salam shaheed, right? He saw what happened in Kufa. He saw the head of Imam Ali alayhi salam. The same face is going through a different trauma now. The same face is covered in blood. And he says, oh, please, for the first time, call me brother. And Hazrat Abbas says, oh my brother, please accept my last salam. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، دیکھو علم ہے دریا سے آتا، اب نہ رہے گا کوئی بھی پیاسا، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، بولی سکینہ نزدیک آؤ، اے پیاسے بچوں خودے اٹھاؤ، بابا چچا کو گلا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، جو سب سے چھوٹا گھر میں ہے بچہ، پہلے اسی کو پانی ملے گا، اصغر ہے پیاسا گھبرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پانی سکینہ تم سب کو دینا، بابا سے لے کر مشکیزہ اپنا، غازی کا بیٹا سمجھا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے، پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔ آیا لم تو بولی سکینہ، اے پیاسے بچو مشکل ہے جینا، میرا یہ کہنا بلوا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔ پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔ پانی کہاں کعب پیاس کیسی، امید ایسی اب آس کیسی، مجھ کو یہ جملہ شرما رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔ پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔ پرچم ہوا میں لہرا رہا ہے، وہ دیکھو پانی آ رہا ہے۔
Hussani, 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 Hussani,
گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے۔
عرش پانی کو جو کوثر کے لٹانے والے، عرش
پانی کو جو کوثر کے لٹانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے۔
ہو گئی شام انہیں شام کے بازاروں میں، ہو گئی
شام میں شام کے بازاروں میں،
ایک بیمار کو لاکھوں میں سکانے والے، ایک
بیمار کو لاکھوں میں سکانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے۔
بولی زینب جو گری خاک پہ تصویر رسول،
بولی زینب جو گری خاک پہ تصویر رسول،
طیبہ سے یاد گنانا کدرانے والے، طیبہ سے یاد گنانا
گرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے۔
رو کے کہتی تھی سکینہ میرے چاچا ہو کہاں،
رو کے کہتی تھی سکینہ میرے چاچا ہو کہاں،
لوٹ کر آئے نہیں پانی پلانے والے،
لوٹ کر آئے نہ پانی پلانے والے، گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے،
آل محمد کے گھرانے والے.
پانی تک تو نے نہ مانگا میرے مظلوم حسین.
پانی تک تو نے نہ مانگا میرے مظلوم حسین.
تیرو خنجر سے وہ پیاس اپنی بجھانے والے. تیرو
خنجر سے وہ پیاس اپنی بجھانے والے. گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے. گئے آل محمد کے گھرانے والے.
حسین 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 حسین
مہینے والے تجھ کو میرا سلام. اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر. اے شاہدی کے دلبر اے شاہدی کے دلبر. اے روح قلب مادر اے شاہدی کے دلبر. اے تشن کام مضطر اے بے زبان اصغر. اے 6 مہینے والے تجھ کو میرا سلام. اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر. تشنا لبی پہ تیری تشنا لبی پہ تیری. گریا ہے سب خدائی تشنا لبی پہ تیری. مظلومیت نے تیری انسانیت جگائی. اے 6 مہینے والے تجھ کو میرا سلام. اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر. سوکھے لبوں پہ تو نے سوکھے لبوں پہ تو نے جس دم زباں پھرائی. سوکھے لبوں پہ تو نے سر کو جھکا کے رویا دشمن کا ہر سپاہی. 6 مہینے والے تجھ کو میرا سلام. اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر. شکوہ نہ کرنا اصغر شکوہ نہ کرنا اصغر. پانی نہیں میسر شکوہ نہ کرنا اصغر آنسو بہا کے میں نے تربت کو کر دیا تر
چھ مہینے والے تجھ کو میرا سلام اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر اصغر ہائے اصغر حسین 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 حسین
عباس نہ لوٹے شاید مشکا گئی عباس نہ لوٹے شاید
مشکا
مقتل کی زمین بھاگ گئی عباس نہ لوٹے شان سے مقتل کو سدھا رات علمدار
اس شان سے مقتل کو صدا رات علمدار
اس شان سے مقتل کو سدھا رات علمدار آدھا کی نظر پا گئی
عباس لوٹے شہر آ گئے مشکا گئی عباس نہ لوٹے
جب تیر چلا بہہ گیا سب مشک سے پانی
مشک سے پانی
جب تیر چلا بہہ گیا سب مشک سے پانی عباس کو شرم آ گئی عباس نہ لوٹے
شہر آ گئے مشکا گئی عباس نہ لوٹے
منہ میں لگی آگ تو منہ کو بلانے
منہ میں لگی آگ تو ہم کو بلانے
منہ میں لگی آگ تو منہ کو بلانے معصوم سکینہ گئی
عباس لوٹے شہر آ گئے مشکا گئی عباس نہ لوٹے
حد ہو گئی بھائی کو منا نے لب ساحل
ہو
गई भाई को मनाने लगे साहिल।
हद हो गई भाई को मनाने लगे साहिल। खुद सानिए ज़हरा गई
अब्बास न लौटे शहर आ गए। माशा गई अब्बास न लौटे।
मक्तल की ज़मीन भाग गई अब्बास न लौटे।
Sai, no sai.
Sai,
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 Sai, no sai. Sai, no sai.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نشجع عاشورا on behalf of Imam Sahib al-Asr al-Zaman, on behalf of all of our marhumin, as well as those facing distress, qurbatan ila Allah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام. وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت. ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها. ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم. ولعن الله عليكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان. ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة. ولعن الله ابن مرجانة. ولعن الله عمر بن سعد. ولعن الله شمرا. ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عظم مصابي بك. فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونصب لك الحرب وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم. وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانه وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى شياعكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم والبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب وبالبراءة من أشياعهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب ثار مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابيبكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين من اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقفى فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنة أبد الآبدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان وقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن ولا ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين عليه السلام وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله، اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي خلقت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر لحظ مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم صل أنت أولا ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا ثم الثانية والثالثة والرابع. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجانة وعمر بن سعد وشمرا وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. السلام عليكم جميعا أئمة المسلمين من ذرية الحسين عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك بسم الله تعالى مخرجك ظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Saying Sehet Altaf Hussein as well as all who are facing these sort of
عباس بھائی کے لیے بھی اپنے
عباس بھائی
اس وینسر والے
Abbas uncle as well. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 اللهم صل على محمد وآله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك حجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا
ودليلا معينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. محمد علی محمد.
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اے رب جا پنجتن پاک کا صدقہ اس قوم کا دامن غم شبیر سے بھر دے. بچوں کو عطا کر علی اصغر کا تبسم. بوڑھوں کو حبیب ابن مظاہر کی نظر دے. کم سن کو ملائے والولائے آن محمد. ہر ایک جوان کو علی اکبر کا جگر دے. ماں کو سکا ثانیہ زہرا کا سلیقہ. بہنوں کو سکینہ کی دعاؤں کا اثر دے. مولا تجھے زینب کی اسیری کی قسم ہے بے جرم اسیروں کو رہائی کی خبر دے. جو چادر زینب کے زار مولا محفوظ ہے سے خواتین کے پردے. جو دین کے کام آئے والا عطا کر. جو مجلس شبیر کی خاطر ہو کر. مفلس صدر لال جوار کے بارش مخروص کا ہر قرض ادا خیر سے کر دے. غم کوئی نہ دے ہم کو سوائے غم شبیر. غم کوئی نہ دے ہم کو سوائے غم شبیر. شبیر کا غم بانٹ رہا ہے تو ادھر دے. نعرہ حیدری. دشمنان شبیر